Hello, and thank you for joining us here on the Neutral Zone. I am Phil Milani, joined as always by my trusty sidekick, my partner in crime. Really, the best way to describe this person is my everything. You know him as at Eric Dalala.
Phil, good to see you on this lovely Wednesday as we record, Phil.
Yeah.
Some shocking news coming out of UC Health Training Center.
Yeah, I heard that they made an addition to the Ring of Fame.
Yeah, and there's no way you would have guessed. I mean, you maybe because you picked all the draft picks correctly, but nobody else would have seen this coming. Peyton Manning elected unanimously in his first year of eligibility.
Yeah. Congratulations to Peyton Manning. The biggest thing that's happened to him this year, getting elected to the Ring of Fame. It is a big honor, though. I do think, all kidding aside, being in a team's Ring of Honor, you're permanently in the stadium. That is a big deal. It just happens that he's also first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think they probably both mean things to equal things to him in different ways, because one is your contribution to the game and the one is your contribution to the franchise. And so I'm sure that this means a great deal from Peyton. I'm sure we'll hear from him at some point about it, but congratulations to him. Obviously, yep. Well-deserved.
We'll discuss Peyton Manning's Ring of Fame election a little bit later on, plus some questions that we want to dive into about, hey, if a guy played a majority of his career somewhere else, but happened to have a really good stretch with the Broncos, does that mean you're a Ring of Famer? We'll get into just some questions we have about the Ring of Fame. I don't think there's any question that Peyton Manning belongs there, but just some questions about what does it mean to be a Ring of Famer? I think there might be some interesting stuff there, Eric. We'll also talk about some comments from Von Miller on this Wednesday, talking about his legacy. Was it you who asked him that question, Eric?
It was. I think I got two questions in somehow.
That's your specialty, Eric. Don't get Tom Agnetti started, a super fan from Delaware. My apologies. I think we said he was from New York. From Delaware. He's always impressed that you get those two questions in there.
Yeah, can't stop me, Phil.
We'll have a voicemail from Tom Agnetti a little bit later on in the show, so I don't want to spoil it, but he did call in. He did call in again. I think he called you the paper boy.
Well, I think it's supposed to be a compliment, but
yeah, because you always deliver.
Yeah, so you are ruining his voicemail.
There's more.
This is a tough look.
There's more to it. Anyway, you asked him about, hey, with Peyton Manning going into the Ring of Fame, does that make you think about your own personal legacy? And, I thought it was interesting. He said, yeah, he does think about that sometimes, and he even thinks about the Hall of Fame too. So, I rarely do you hear a player say, yeah, sometimes I do think about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's good enough that it makes sense. Like, he's a guaranteed Ring of Famer. We'll talk about this more, but one thing that stood out to me, Phil, that we can dive into is he said, I don't want to have the Peyton Manning years be the highlight of my career. And so what would it take to make that not the highlight? Obviously, you'd have to do something pretty special here to even rival that. So maybe we'll get into that. And what could he realistically do that would make 2021 just as good?
Yeah. So a couple of interesting topics to dive into here on this episode of the Neutral Zone. Eric, one thing that makes every Neutral Zone episode special is that this is a two-way street between us doing the podcast and NZ Nation, the listeners, the viewers. We want this to be the communication go back and forth, and there's several ways that they can get involved, right, Eric?
That's right. They can leave a voicemail at 707-NEUTRAL. They can leave an email at neutralzoneshow@gmail.com. They could tweet at Broncos podcast, kind of an undiscovered avenue. And then, Phil, your personal favorite, I know, is just to go right at us on Twitter.
A direct blast is what I prefer. Yeah.
Just,
if you just think that we're the worst things ever, just let us know directly at Eric Dalala with an A, at Phil Milani with a PH. Unusual spellings right there.
Untraditional, if you will.
Unusual, traditional spellings. Yeah. Yeah. And then the other way that we also really enjoy is if you're watching us on YouTube, just go ahead and leave a comment and also smash that subscribe button. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah, exactly. And we got some great comments last week, Eric. Mike Williams 0728 says, how tall is Phil? He's towering over Michael Ojemudia. What do you think?
I like to say you're 1.5 times the size of a normal person.
Yeah. Like for example, when we all take like a group photo,
Yeah.
I stick out.
That's okay.
Like I look odd. Like I look like I should only interview like offensive linemen or NBA players, maybe.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay. Somebody's got to be the tallest.
Actually, not we didn't mention Peyton Manning. I'm almost a perfect stand-in for Peyton Manning, height wise.
Yeah.
Not as funny though.
You guys are comparable in many ways, I've heard.
I don't have a laser rocket arm though. Diego Martinez says Boy Wonder is Robin. We had some confusion about Boy Wonder versus Batman and Robin last week, Eric. Diego Martinez is reminding us that Boy Wonder is in fact Robin. Said you guys should know this. Chris Carruthers says, what's up, guys? Go Broncos. What's up, Chris? What else do we have here? Suko Moku says tremendous too, because we were talking about maybe adding a third person to the podcast. No, Suka says just keep it at tremendous too.
I agree.
And then let's see, one other comment to talk to about here is Roberto Carlos Acevedo Becerra says can't get enough of you guys. Much love from Broncos fans in Mexico.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. We often say NZ Nation, but it's really NZ World.
That's true.
Yeah.
NZ Nations.
Nations. Yeah. There you go. I like that, Eric. So if you'd like to be part of the show or mentioned or anything like that, go ahead and leave a comment or a voicemail or whatever in all the ways that we just mentioned there. But Eric, let's get into our first topic of conversation here. Let's talk a little bit about Von Miller first.
Let's do it, Phil.
What do you think about where he is in his career? He's heading into his 11th season, coming off of a injury that sidelined him for all of the 2020 season. Where do you think he is right now, and where do you think his legacy lies if he were to never play again?
A little bit dark, but
that is dark. Sorry.
I would say that if he were to, next time he does a press conference, he were to say, you know what, actually I'm done, I'm not going to play anymore. He's a guaranteed Ring of Famer. I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer yet, just because he's got the 8 Pro Bowls. He's got 3 first team All Pros. He's got the Super Bowl MVP, obviously, but his 106 career sacks, that has him 25th on the all-time list. And you look above him, and there's some, there's maybe 8 to 10 guys that are not in the Hall of Fame who have more sacks than him. Obviously, not those guys don't have the Super Bowl hardware that he has, but I think there's a little bit more work to do, Phil, of for him to get to even a guaranteed spot in the Hall of Fame, but definitely to get to a first ballot. I think if he could, he's at 106 sacks. If he could get to like the 125, 130 range over the rest of his career, and granted, we saw this with Bruce Smith, as he goes along, you're getting fewer sacks per year. You're not going to, he's not going to get there in 1 or 2 years probably. But if he can get to that 125, 130 range, I'd say he's safely in the Hall. And then, you look at a guy like DeMarcus Ware, Phil, he's right in that range. I think he has like 137 and a half, if I'm correct.
138 and a half.
I shorted him a sack. But
yeah.
He's a guy that's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, we think, just because of what this class looks like. So if Vaughn can get into the 130s, then I think you're talking about first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I agree with you, Eric, because if you look at like the people who are right above him, guys who played quite a while ago, but like Trace Armstrong, Pat Swilling, Greg Townsend, Sean Jones, those guys aren't in the Hall of Fame, right now, and they're not like names that are like household names. Like you don't talk about those guys all the time when you're talking about the greats of the game. So I do think that with like say like 20 more sacks, I do think then he would be in the range of guaranteed Hall of Famer, borderline first ballot type of guy. And I certainly think he's on that trajectory. I mean, he says that he's feeling really good right now. We heard George Payton with a season ticket event the other day. He said something like Vaughn is 32 years old, but he's still winning all the wind sprints out on the field. So I think that Vaughn is a special kind of an athlete, the kind of guy that, it's almost like kind of like LeBron a little bit, where you still see him make some amazing plays out there. Sure, his game has evolved over the years, but he can still get it done when you really need him to. I think that Vaughn might be that kind of guy where his game is going to have to start changing a little bit. He's not going to just be just that explosive guy, but I do think that when he needs it, maybe it's a big third down, fourth down play. He's still got that.
Yeah, and I kind of view the floor for him, Phil, and this is not my projection, but I think like worst case scenario, I would think he would end up with like 5 sacks this season as long as he stays healthy. And so
That is awfully low.
right, but you think like,
yeah.
But then you think like, hey, can Vaughn put together 4 more seasons of that? And based on what that total is compared to what he's done in the past, obviously before 2019, I think his last 7 seasons were double-digit sacks, and so we know that he's capable of that. But say he splits that in half and gets to 5, it's certainly reasonable to assume he can get 5 per year over the next 4 years, which would, I think, get him to age 36, and then then he's in that range that you're talking about, Phil, where guaranteed Hall of Fame, borderline first ballot, and so that's kind of, to me, what I look at. I suspect he could be in the 10 to 12 sack range if all goes right. I mean, I don't know that we're going to see any more, and this is without seeing him at full speed. Last year during training camp, I would have said, last year TJ Watt had 15 sacks, Phil. The way Vaughn looked in training camp, I think he would have challenged for the NFL sack lead a season ago. But just projecting out, maybe he doesn't have games anymore where it's like the Seahawks game or the Cardinals game where he has 3 sacks in a game, but instead he just, he knows what he's doing. He knows these offensive tackles. He knows the defensive game plan. He's crafty. Has a lot of experience. I think he could still find a way to get to 10 sacks over the course of a year for maybe a couple more years. And then you kind of get down into that lower range. I mean, Phil, over the end of Bruce Smith's career, he had his final Pro Bowl was in 98 when he had 10 sacks. And then over his final 5 years, he went 7, 10, 5, 9, 5. If Vaughn were to end in that range over the next few years, he's going to put himself into the top 10 all-time of sacks and solidify that Hall of Fame status.
Yeah. And Vaughn traditionally in his career has not had those huge sack numbers over an entire year. Like his biggest year was 18 and a half, and that was his second year in the league. He's more in that 10 to 14 range traditionally. When he's healthy, the worst year he's ever had was 8 sacks, and that was 2019. So I definitely think that if he's healthy, if this defense stacks up the way that we sort of are assuming that it's going to stack up, then I do think that you could be talking about a 10 sack season here for Vaughn. So he's already the franchise leader in sacks. He's definitely, his legacy within the Broncos organization is already solidified. I mean, we all remember that 2015 season. That's going to go down in Broncos history, and that'll always be talked about. But then if you're talking about his contributions to the game, where he stacks up as one of the greatest pass rushers of all time, he's still got work to do.
Yeah, and I think the last 2 years have really hurt him because in terms of all-time status, like there was a while there where, and I'm pretty sure since 2011 he still has the most sacks since he entered the league. If not, might be like Chandler Jones by just a hair, but I think since 2012 Chandler Jones has more, but since 2011 Vaughn has the most. But in 2018, when Vaughn had 14 and a half sacks playing alongside Bradley Chubb, you thought, man, the sky is a limit for these two guys. And then obviously Bradley Chubb gets hurt in 2019. And so Vaughn's playing somewhat shorthanded, only has 8 sacks. And then last year doesn't play at all because of his injury. And so you go from a place where, Vaughn had 98 sacks 2 years ago and has only managed to add 8 over the last 2 years. It hurts your average a little bit, obviously.
Yeah, and like it hurts when you don't have that other guy to go with you. It hurts when your team hasn't been playing up to the standard that we all think that Broncos country has gotten used to. When you're talking about 5-win teams, it's hard to have those super high sack totals. Normally these guys are playing on good teams. They're playing with the lead a lot. They're playing with strong secondaries. So that's where you normally are. Chandler Jones has 97 sacks since 2012. That's when he was drafted. So,
right. And so Vaughn is just shy of that, right?
Yeah. So Vaughn obviously has 106, but his first year he had 11 and a half. So yes, since 2012, Chandler Jones has more. So, but yeah, I do think that if this defense is coming together as we all think that it is, I do think that Vaughn is primed to have a big year. Like there's no reason to think that, because he had this injury last year, that's really going to, take that explosiveness away or anything like that. That's not my understanding, Eric.
Yeah. And so then I think, he says, I don't want the Manning years to be the highlight of my career. In my eyes, outside of winning a Super Bowl, which I think is probably a stretch, the next step for this team is to make the playoffs, to win a playoff game, in my opinion, at least. If he were to lead the league in sacks and win Defensive Player of the Year, Phil, do you think when we look back at Von Miller's career, you'd say like, hey, that's just as impressive as what he did in 2015?
I mean, I think that all these guys, Vaughn included, it's more about the team. So like if he wins a Super Bowl, that's definitely going to be the highlight, especially the way he played in that Super Bowl and that playoff run. That was like magical. Do you know what I mean? So like if he were to become Defensive Player of the Year in 2021, I think we would look at that as like, wow, what an amazing season. That's definitely like number 2 in terms of when I'm looking at my career overall. But number 1 will still be Super Bowl MVP. It's hard for anybody to top a Super Bowl MVP, and so I do think that when he's talking about highlights, I think he also said something like, it feels like we have something special going on here, which to me, that means team wise, we've got something special. I don't think that he means, oh, hey, this defense is going to be good, I'm going to be Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's thinking, I think we got something special going on here where maybe down the road, who knows, this team could be in the mix. That's probably what I'm thinking he's thinking.
I'm not suggesting that he said that he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year, or that like a year ago when he said, hey, I've got a couple more chances to lead the league in sacks. I'm not saying that he's saying that. I'm speculating what would he need to do to kind of get in that conversation as Super Bowl MVP. And I do think if he were to win Defensive Player of the Year and you're writing like the lead to his Hall of Fame story, you'd say Von Miller, the 2015 Super Bowl MVP and 2021 Defensive Player of the Year. Like those would go hand in hand. The same way with Peyton Manning, you say Peyton Manning, 2-time Super Bowl champion and 5-time NFL MVP.
Yeah. Yes, but the Super Bowl MVP is going to come first. Like I don't think.
Right. I'm just saying that
Von Miller, the 2021 NFL Defensive Player of the Year and Super Bowl MVP. I think nothing's going to top that unless he does it again. Or maybe he doesn't win Super Bowl MVP, but maybe he's like that veteran that helps a young defense or a young team get to that mountaintop. Maybe he would still personally feel that same satisfaction of like, I'm the old vet here, but I helped this team win. I think maybe he'd get that same satisfaction, but I don't think he's quite there yet. Maybe like 4 years from now, he might be feeling like that. But now I still think that he could be a major contributor on a winning team. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with the pieces around him. Is Bradley Chubb healthy when he comes back from this ankle? How do the quarterbacks play? Is the offense putting you in situations where Vaughn can't tee off and get those sacks? I mean, there's a lot of things when you're a pass rusher that your success depend on. And so we'll just have to see. But if he plays like he did, like he looked like he was ready to play last year, and he says he does, then you're right. I think he's still got a lot of potential here.
yeah, and if that secondary is like the no-fly zone 2.0, he's going to have his chances. So we'll have to see. You never know what's going to happen, because this time last year we were talking about how great a shape he was in, and like all these workout videos that he'd been putting out and stuff like that. We had been dissecting those. So we'll have to see. I hope that he stays healthy, because I really want to see what Von Miller and Bradley Chubb look like with Vic Fangio. I mean, I just want to see what that looks like. The other interesting thing is behind him, there's like Malik Reed, and then a lot of question marks in terms of like a fourth pass rusher here. So like, I don't think Vaughn could like settle into a role right now where maybe he's like a 2-down linebacker. I don't think so. Like, he's still going to have to play a lot of minutes.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So, Eric, let's move on to our second topic here, and talking about legacies here, and the legacy of Peyton Manning. You could add one more line to his already amazing resume, and that is Broncos Ring of Famer.
Yeah, and not surprising. It was a matter of time. You knew it was coming, but for him to accomplish what he did in 4 years in Denver, comeback player of the year, MVP, led the team to 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl 50. I think he's second in almost every passing category in team history. I think he's number 1 in completion percentage, if I'm correct. But to do that in 4 years is just remarkable. And for people who don't know, 4 years is the minimum that you have to play for this franchise to be eligible for the Ring of Fame. And so I don't know, had he played 3 years and had the same success, I think you still maybe make an exception and put him in the Ring of Fame anyway. But certainly to be here for 4 years, he's as deserving as a lot of those guys that are already up there.
Eric, I think your microphone is banging on your shirt, and people are getting
I apologize.
Listeners,
you're getting upset.
Your microphone is banging on your sweater there, so that's what that noise is. But yes, Eric, this kind of leads me into my conversation points that I wanted to touch on here. First of all, what do you think about that 4-year? What do you think about that? Like, do you think that when you think about Peyton Manning, I think the fact that he won a Super Bowl here really cements the fact that you think of him as a 2 franchise quarterback. The record-breaking moments happened while he was in a Broncos uniform. The last impression that we'll ever have of Peyton Manning is having that Super Bowl trophy handed to him as a Bronco. So while he played the majority of his career in Indy, I do think the fact that he had all these moments in Denver really makes it feel like he was a 2 franchise quarterback. What do you think? Do you think 4 years is enough? Because like a guy like John Lynch, he played 4 years here. They did not have the team success that they had with Peyton Manning, but he's still in the Ring of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, I think 3-4 years, it's on the shorter end that you'd expect someone to be with a team to make a big enough impact on that organization. And part of it is like, can you piece together the story of the team without those guys? And I do think a guy like John Lynch, it's fair to say, like, hey, in the mid 2000s, when this team like became relevant again for the first time since John Elway retired, John Lynch was a big part of that. He was there for the AFC Championship game, came in and helped this team. If you were listing off guys from that team, and that's where it's like, well, is Jake Plummer good enough to be in? And I know some people think that he should, obviously he's not the first ballot type guy that Peyton is, but to me, it's more with those guys that have not been here all that long. It's, can you tell the story of the franchise without them? And John Lynch, I don't think so. Peyton Manning, you definitely cannot. But that's when, then you get to a guy like DeMarcus Ware, who played 3 years, but I do think it's very hard to tell the story of that team those years without the impact that DeMarcus had. And so I don't expect that they'll waive it for him. I think that he just won't be a Broncos Ring of Famer, but he's come back here several times. Obviously, this place means something to him. But yeah, it's right on the edge, and it's interesting because, like, say Tom Brady plays 1 or 2 more years in Tampa Bay, they probably got to put him in their Ring of Honor, even if he just plays 1 more year because he led him to a Super Bowl.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is that when you think of a guy, I almost think like, okay, there's 2 ways to approach it. Can you tell a story of the Broncos without this guy? And then also, when you look at the individual, what team do you think of when you think of this player? And like DeMarcus Ware is an outstanding example. Like, do you think of him as a Bronco, or do you think of him as a Cowboy? It's really hard to tell, considering he never won a Super Bowl in Dallas. There's something about winning a Super Bowl that really changes that dynamic of what you think of a player, and also what he means to the franchise. So, like, you look back at those 90s Super Bowls team, there's a lot of Ring of Famers on those teams. Ed McCaffrey is the one who's noticeably missing in my mind, but like Mike Shanahan was just elected. They're going to be able to put his name up later on this season as well. But when you think of Super Bowl teams, you think of a lot of Ring of Famers, and Peyton Manning is the first from this most recent Super Bowl, but I imagine there's going to be a lot of guys from this team that end up in the Broncos Ring of Fame, and it's just interesting how they came up with that 4-year minimum.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some sort of method to the madness there. I don't quite know what went into that. I personally think of DeMarcus as a Cowboy, just because he did spend significantly more time there. His peak years were with the Cowboys. He did win the Super Bowl in Denver and had a 10-sack season, and certainly was a contributor, an important contributor in 2015, but he wasn't like the dominant player that he once was. Whereas Peyton Manning in Denver reached that dominance. He won MVP, he won Comeback Player of the Year, he set the all-time single season passing and touchdown records. Like, that to me has something to do with it. And that, like, for Peyton, it wasn't just that he was here for 4 years and won a Super Bowl. He was as good as he'd ever been here.
Yeah, and I mean, Peyton Manning is a slam dunk. Like, it's not even a really a question. That's not, by no means is that what I'm arguing that he shouldn't be in. It's just it just brings up the question, just because he played so long in Indianapolis, just like what is the definition in your mind of what a Ring of Famer means? And there are some tough questions, coming up, because a lot of guys played for a lot of teams that had significant moments in Denver that once they retire, there's going to be some serious questions, about like a guy like Aqib Talib or Emmanuel Sanders, or, these type of players who had good chunks of time here in Denver, but they also had success elsewhere in the NFL. Do those guys, did they mean enough to the Broncos to warrant time, being put into the Ring of Fame? Because, the Ring of Fame, you don't want to like damage its credibility ever. Do you know what I mean? Because you want this to be like the best of the best that ever played for this organization. So you do have to think about, where these guys stand in the history of the team. And you get the bust out in front of the stadium, your name is put up into the rafters. I mean, it's a big deal.
It is. And, to talk about those 2 guys that you just brought up, I mean, Emmanuel Sanders, I think, played 5 years here, 5.5. And he, 2 Pro Bowls, but if you look at it, Phil, he's like 8th or 9th on the all-time receiving lists in Denver, which to me is not quite high enough to justify Ring of Fame inclusion. But you look at Aqib Talib, 4 Pro Bowls in 4 years, a first-team All-Pro appearance. He had 6 pick sixes just in 4 seasons with Denver, which would be in the top 20 all time. He did that in 4 years. I think he's third all time right now with 10. Or excuse me, fourth all time with 10. To me, that's enough. And like, Chris Harris, I'm sure, is a guy that's going to come back and be in the Ring of Fame. To me, to have Chris Harris and Aqib Talib in the Ring of Fame, when you talk about that no-fly defense that helped win Super Bowl 50 as much as Vaughn did, those are both guys that need to be in there, I think. And Aqib made enough of an impact and had so many game-changing plays that, to me, he's a guy that deserves to be in it, despite the fact that he's bounced around a lot.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I think that when you think about Aqib, you definitely think of his years in Denver. Obviously played in Tampa and New England and with the Rams and stuff, but I do think of him as a Bronco now. So, and obviously Demaryius Thomas is going to be a Ring of Famer. So there's going to be a large representation from that Super Bowl 50 team.
Yeah.
But the other question that I had about the Ring of Fame, Eric, is that there's a 5-year waiting period where after a guy retires, you have to wait 5 years before you can be elected into the Ring of Fame. It's just so happened that most recently here, Champ Bailey and Peyton Manning also happened to be first ballot Hall of Famers. What do you think? And then they became Ring of Famers, which kind of seems counterintuitive that they've been elected to the Hall of Fame and then the Broncos Ring of Fame. What do you think about that 5-year waiting period?
Yeah, I'd like to see that changed. I think, like you mentioned, it's a little bit odd to go into the Hall of Fame before you're in your own team's Ring of Fame. And certainly the Broncos rules are a little bit different than some other teams. Like Peyton Manning went into the Colts Ring of Honor, I think they call it, in like 2016 or 2017, like right after he retired, he was in there. Yeah, exactly. There's a nice statue there. To me, Phil, 3 years maybe makes sense because you want to make sure that the player isn't going to come back and play again, which I think is part of why the Hall of Fame has that 5-year rule. But like Demaryius Thomas last played here in 2018, I think that's correct, 2017 or 2018.
Yep.
He is still not technically retired. So say he retires this year, the earliest he can go into the Ring of Fame is 2026. That's going to be almost 10 years after he played. To me, that's a little bit too long for a guy like DT that spent essentially his entire career here, is a guy you want to honor. So, you think about a guy like Vaughn too. Like you don't want to think about him playing elsewhere, but if he, is like Bruce Smith and bounces around a couple other places and it's, now it's 10 years since he's played in Denver. It's just I think you're missing out with like that generation of fans that probably wants to celebrate those guys. So I think something like 3 years would make a little bit more sense, speed it up a little bit. You can have guys in the Ring of Fame before they're in the Hall of Fame, get to celebrate them a couple different times. So to me, that's what makes the most sense.
Eric, I'm not sure if you heard this, but Von Miller's Broncos for life.
I have heard that.
Okay, so please don't upset me and the listeners by suggesting otherwise.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
Very upsetting, Eric. I do agree that three could be a nice spot because the problem with 4 is if he got elected to the Broncos Ring of Fame, they'd have a big, nice ceremony for him going into the Ring of Fame. And then the very next year, if he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, he'd have to come back and do a whole big Hall of Fame ceremony. So
yeah, I like how you're just like inventing problems. You're like, the problem with 4, even though nobody brought it up, is this.
Well, I'm saying 3
like
is nice.
The problem with 6. The problem with 6 months is that it's too soon.
Yeah. Well, I think that the natural thing is, okay, 5 we think is too long. What about 4?
No, but neither of us said that.
Yeah, well, I just maybe somebody was thinking it, Eric.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody was thinking,
yeah.
Well, what
why
about
not 1?
Well, 1 is too short.
Okay, well, just take me through all the other numbers. What about 7?
1 is too short. Okay, because they could come back and play after 1 year.
Okay.
2 years, still you might come back, or like maybe, you're not sure about where they sit in their legacy. You still are processing, wow,
Yeah.
this guy's missing. Like, here's what he meant to the organization.
You'd be like in the Ring of Fame meeting and they'd be talking about Peyton Manning and you'd be like, well, here's why we shouldn't induct Trevor Siemian into the Ring of Fame. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? And you'd be like, well, maybe it was on some people's minds
Eric,
that we
you're
should.
the only person who thinks about Trevor Siemian nonstop.
Just using an example of a guy that we can talk about that won't think we're blasting him.
Got it. Yeah. That you're the only person who's constantly thinking. If you moved your camera there just a little bit to the other side, right
This
next
way?
to
No.
some of those other pictures,
There's no Trevor Siemian
Huge.
anywhere, Phil.
keep going.
I can't turn my computer anymore.
Oh, I know where it is. You moved it and put it behind the camera.
It's exactly, that's where it
Your
is.
shrine. You've got a shrine there.
It's interesting that you're like coming up with like there's an infinite number of numbers. So you could be like 1 million years is too long. In case anyone was thinking that's
like
too long.
I'm trying to go through the Goldilocks. I'm not sure if you've ever read that book, Eric.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That'd be like if you were like, instead of Papa, Mama, and baby's porridge, you were like, well, what about Uncle Tucker's porridge? Like, did anybody consider how hot that was? And then you're like, I just wanted to get that out there just in case people were thinking about it.
Supposed to be Uncle Tucker.
Probably not.
Knows about you.
Yeah.
It's terrible. That's the word. Yeah. I feel bad. I'm here to give representation to Uncle Tucker. Okay.
Yeah. Voice to the voiceless. That's your that's what you stand for.
I do think that 3 years could be a nice little spot there. Obviously, this is only a recent problem because Champ Bailey was the first person that's ever happened to. Peyton Manning is now the second. John Elway was obviously a first ballot Hall of Famer, but they did make an exception for him, and he was inducted immediately the next year into the Ring of Fame.
I will say one positive about the 5 years, maybe in 4 years, is that it gives some time for the other guys. Because if you were to change it now to like, 3 years, that Super Bowl 50 rush is going to arrive quicker than you might think of guys from that team that have retired. And so then guys who are on the outside looking in, whether it's an Ed McCaffrey, an Al Wilson, a Riley Odoms, whoever it might be, their chances, I think, go down if you get to those Super Bowl 50 guys faster.
Yeah. And there have been bigger classes, obviously, in the past where it's not just one guy, but it's
been a while. It's been only one person, I think, since 2016 when John Lynch went in alongside Simon Fletcher and Jason Elam.
Yeah, exactly. But there have been those 3-person classes that they could go back and do something like that. But it's rare to like go all the way back to like Riley Odoms and like elect him along with like a Chris Harris or something like that.
Right.
So I do agree with you that there is going to be a wave coming here where they're going to have to decide how they want to handle some of these things.
Well, and for those guys, you wonder, are they going to get in? Because like 2018, they decided not to have a class, and obviously like Ed McCaffrey and Riley Odoms and Al Wilson, their stats have not changed. And so Al Wilson is a guy, Phil, I would really like to see get in. I posed the question on Twitter, who would you like to see be next to the fans? A lot of Greek answers. Steve Antonopoulos, I would say that was the overwhelming majority of who the next person in the Ring of Fame should be. Had a lot of Ed McCaffrey's, Demaryius Thomas. I had to kind of explain that he's not eligible. And then Al Wilson, Phil, I think I at least am of the opinion that he should be in for what he did for this team. A good enough player, I think.
Obviously, the Broncos announced that Greek has retired after 45 years with the Broncos earlier this week. That was one thing that a lot of players brought up when I was talking to them about it. Shannon Sharp, other players like that, were saying he belongs in the Ring of Fame. What do you think about that, Eric? Right now, just Broncos coaches and players, and then Pat Bowlen in the Broncos Ring of Fame, like an owner there. What do you think about a trainer being in the Ring of Fame?
Well, Gerald Phipps is in there too, Phil, as an owner. Okay. Don't forget Gerald Phipps's contributions, please.
Yes.
I mean, you've got several coaches. Again, if you're
writing the history of the
the history, or like how do you, just how do you denote the eras of Broncos football? Greek belongs in there. And so, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they do that at some point. They're already going to honor him by renaming the training room after him, but to put him in the Ring of Fame, I think would be fitting. And then Phil, of course, I'll pound the table for Gary Kubiak for a long time that for all he did, that he belongs in there too, but we'll maybe later.
That could be like an entire series of episodes.
Yeah, at some point, I'm just going to break off on my own and just do called the Gary Kubiak podcast.
Yeah.
It'll be called Hey Bud.
How's the family?
Exactly.
Yeah. We're working hard. Yeah. Those are all Gary Kubiak. I loved his congratulations message to Greek.
He was on the farm.
It's on the
ranch.
Yeah. He's out on the ranch there. So make sure you check that out. Very on brand for Gary Kubiak. But yeah, when you talk about the next guys, I definitely think McCaffrey, Al Wilson, a Greek, somebody like that, I think it definitely makes sense. The Greek thing is going to be interesting just because someone in that position has never been elected to the Ring of Fame. So you would be like opening the door sort of to other employees, and wondering if I mean, is Eric Dalala someday going to be in the Broncos Ring of Fame?
Yeah, that's your path forward, Phil.
That's
you got to get Greek in, and then it kind of clears the way for you.
Yeah, that's my mission in life.
Yeah.
Good mission to have, if you ask me. All right, Eric, let's get to our favorite part of the show, shout-outs.
That's right. We'll shout out Liz Manis-Gerald's early this week because she was a little afraid last week that she was going to get left behind.
She thought it wasn't going to happen, but of course we would never forget.
Yeah, we would never do that.
The Broncos had some high school players out at practice on Wednesday.
That's right. They did. Our friend Bobby Mestis, I think, helped organize that. Vic Fangio, big with the high school coaches, big with the high school players.
Yes.
He respects that part of the game and its value. I like that, Phil. You don't forget your roots from Dunmore, Pennsylvania to Denver.
Dunmore, is that what side of Pennsylvania is that on?
It's like I've done more than you.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Is that something you say often or probably not?
To you, yeah, quite a bit.
Eric, I'd like to shout out, obviously, Greek. We just mentioned him. 45 years with the Broncos. Wish him all the best in retirement. Heard that he's slowly been picking up golf, Eric. So he's not very good right now, but I heard he's trying to get better, which means that he would be a good playing partner for you.
True. Yeah. Vaughn also said he was getting into golf. And based on his Instagram short stories, he wears like pretty short shorts. So that would make him a good partner for you.
Exactly. And maybe some sandals. That would be
exactly. You guys out there just quads all over the place.
Eric, Vaughn mentioned that he's really good at a lot of things in life.
He did say that. Yeah.
It just happens to be that football is what he's best at. One thing I know for a fact that he is not good at is basketball.
Oh,
he is a terrible, terrible basketball player.
I've seen him play golf too. And in the past, at least, he was not very good at that either.
Yeah. So I don't know if I believe what he was saying. Eric, speaking of basketball, shout out to my guy, Nikola Jokic.
Yeah. And my guy, Facu.
Campazzo.
Yeah, that's my guy, Phil. I don't think you can overstate what Facu means to this Nuggets team.
A lot of heart, a lot of energy. He represents that defensive buzz, that you don't like to face in the playoffs just because he's so much energy. Really interesting seeing him go up against Chris Paul.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul doesn't seem to mind, especially in the fourth quarter, but generally you like the intensity. We're recording this before game 2, Phil. Hopefully the Nuggies can pull it out.
Yes. But I was going to say Nikola Jokic, MVP this week. That deserves a shout out on a Broncos podcast.
It does. Joins Terrell Davis, John Elway, and Peyton Manning as NFL MVPs, as MVPs in Denver.
Yes.
Obviously, a couple Avs players as well, but
Peter
this is a
Forsberg, Joe
it's a,
Sakic,
it's a Broncos podcast, so
Peter Forsberg and Joe Sakic, NHL MVPs. Maybe Nathan McKinnon in the future.
yeah, probably not this year. The way that things are going.
For the Rockies, Larry Walker is the team's owner.
Yeah. Phil, don't want to spend the hours on this that you probably could, but I did see a tweet that suggested that Jokic was maybe on pace or like had put himself into the conversation that he could be the greatest athlete in Denver history above John Elway. I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, that kind of hurts. I had to like, when you sent that to me the other day, I had to like just sit down for a second and just like recompose myself. Because I do think that as time goes on, maybe you forget just how good John Elway was. And not just that, but what he meant to this city. Do you know what I mean? There's a reason why he went into the Ring of Fame the very next year. I mean, he was a beacon of hope for a lot of people. I'm sure that there was like some people out there who had like some trying experiences in their personal life. And every Sunday they had a chance to have an escape from that by watching John Elway. And, you know, I think I think people forget that. Now, I will say, I never thought a Nuggets player could win NBA MVP. And so the fact that Jokic has come in here against all odds and has done that is really, really impressive. And I think if somehow he can win an NBA championship, then let's have this conversation, because then it would be very real. I mean, if the Nuggets win a title, that would definitely certainly elevate him into that. But when you're talking about Denver sports icons, the list is John Elway, Joe Sakic, and then Peyton Manning, Peter Forsberg, people like that. But there's a big gap after John Elway, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Jokic would have to win multiple championships and probably multiple MVPs to like put himself in a real conversation. Like if the Nuggets won somehow 2 championships and Jokic added another MVP, you'd have to think about whether that was true. But I do agree with you. And one I'll say in the NBA, very hard to repeat as MVP. They hate giving it to the same guy. So that's one issue there. But I do think what John Elway, what he did for the city, putting him on the map, it's just hard for somebody to have that sort of impact now. And I also don't know that people are going to talk about Jokic as like one of the all-time greats the same way that people talk about Elway. But maybe if he wins a couple MVPs and wins a couple of championships, they have that conversation.
Jokic is still very young, so he could.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible he could get there, but let's not have that conversation just yet.
Yeah. Here's one other question for you, Phil. Jokic right now, is Peyton Manning still above him in the echelon of Denver athletes?
I think right now, probably yes, but
would you expect Jokic to move past Manning at some point?
It's possible. It is possible, just because he's so young, and I do think you have to recognize the fact that it is the NBA, where the landscape is just way different. It wasn't that long ago where Carmelo Anthony wanted to leave Denver for a bigger market, and there was this notion that superstars don't really want to come play in Denver with the Nuggets, because you're just not going to get the exposure. You're not going to get the marketing deals. Well, because of the way the Nuggets have drafted, now they have superstars that they've drafted and have built this culture in Denver, that's just not the case anymore. The Nuggets are a national game. You know, they're playing in primetime all the time. They've made these deep runs in the playoffs. That narrative is completely flipped, and that is because of Jokic. So I do think that he needs to get that respect. So I do think that he could be someday ahead of Manning, but I do think that it's probably going to take a title.
When he demands a trade to the Knicks to play alongside LeBron and Bronny, how much would he have to do in New York to get into their Ring of Honor?
You like to hurt me, don't you? You like to say things that just cut to the core.
Yes, starting center for your New York Knicks, Nikola Jokic.
Well, like for you, how did it feel when you saw Peyton Manning?
And then 45-year-old LeBron James will just be dunking all over fools.
Yeah. Yeah, with his son.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Him and Von Miller, same
Yeah.
similar age,
Yeah.
I think, right there. So
Yeah. Well, you'll be like, Von's in the best shape of his life. He's 63 years old.
yeah. No, I'll tell you what, those quads will still be that big.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eric, let's get to our first and only voicemail for this episode here. It's from Tom Agnetti. I think that we have to go ahead and play this one.
Hi, this is Tom Agnetti calling again, actually from Delaware. I grew up in New York as a Broncos fan and in 1986, but actually it was probably the beginning of 87. I talked so much trash in high school that my mother had to take the phone off the hook when the Broncos were just getting destroyed by the Giants. That definitely didn't go my way. So I don't know if you're familiar with the term off the hook, but like Eric, the Paperboy Delilah, he's off the hook. He's asking Coach Fangio today 3 questions. Not only did he find out the injury, he asked, what is the injury? And then he did a follow-up, and he just told him up front, I got a couple questions for you. That's it. Go big or go home. That's the way to do it. Forget about it.
Forget about it, Eric. Forget about it.
That's a great New York / Delaware voicemail. Just everything you could hope for.
My apologies. Last week, I thought he was still in New York. I think it was the accent, Eric.
Yeah. It's a good accent.
Yeah. And just the general attitude, a lot of New York vibes there.
Yes, for sure.
I'm a big fan of that. So appreciate Tom Agnetti coming through with the voicemails. We want people to leave voicemails. We appreciate this. And if it takes Eric asking 3 or 4 questions in a press conference, he'll do that.
I'll do it. You can't stop me.
You're like, 4 questions for you, Vic. Here, hold on a second. Get my list out.
That would be a like a funny thing to do, to just see how far you could push it. Like if I was like 3 for you, Coach, or like 2 for you, and then I've got to follow up, or like Vic, 6 quick ones for you. Just see how far I could get it.
Sometimes Ryan O'Halloran does that with the injury report.
Well, that's like several questions, but it's under one umbrella.
Yeah. You're talking about 6 totally separate
6
questions.
different questions. Yeah. I'm going to ask about 6 different position groups today.
Yeah. Another nice thing you do is like, you don't let things slide. If they don't give you the answer you like, Eric, you just hammer them.
Yeah.
It must be like
I'm like, tell me the injury for Bobby Massey right now.
Exactly. Like there must be a moment of fear when they're like, okay, next up here is Eric Delilah. Everybody's just braces for what's about to happen.
Yeah. People out there, listeners, you might wonder why Phil never asks a question during press conferences.
I only do
because the talent only does one-on-ones.
I only do when I'm not competing against anybody and I just ask whatever I want.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a nice little interview up on DenverBroncos.com right now up front with Andrew Beck.
With who?
Andrew Beck.
Oh, nice. I love Andrew Beck.
Tight end, fullback.
Yeah, good guy.
Tremendous hair, Eric, which is
yes.
When
really good hair.
Some people are like, okay, who do you want to interview? Like, you want to interview Drew Lock? You want to interview Von Miller? And I'm like, give me Andrew Beck because the hair is tremendous.
Yeah. Von's hair, not tremendous right now. I don't know what's going on back there, but it's not great.
Yeah. Yeah. We should do like a hair competition with the Broncos right now because Tim Patrick, his hair, whatever's going on there, we need to investigate a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't like those questions a week ago or so.
He said it changes depending on like where the sun is in the sky.
Yeah.
So we do need to do a whole segment on that Broncos hair because Andrew Beck would be up there, followed closely by you.
Naturally.
So if you'd like to leave a voicemail and maybe we could talk about your hair or something, I'm not sure.
Send us a photo of your hair.
707 neutral, Eric. You can
That's right.
Send us a picture of what your hair looks like and we'll talk about it.
Perfect.
Because you could also email Eric.
That's right. That'd be an easier way to send a picture is if you left an email at neutralzoneshow@gmail.com or just tweet a photo of yourselves at us. Don't tweet a photo of me and Phil. That'd be weird because I don't know how you'd have that.
That would be weird.
Yeah.
At Eric Dalala with an A, at Phil Milani with a PH. What did you say? There was like an at Broncos podcast, something?
I'm unclear if that's real or not. I would just avoid that.
Yeah. Do you think Roya, who runs that account, is listening?
No, not a chance.
No. She claims that the last time we kind of put her on the spot that she missed that episode or something happened. Here's a chance at some redemption here, Roya.
Yep.
Or also just subscribe to the YouTube page here. That way, next Thursday, say it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, boom, it's right in your feed.
It's right there. You got
You
no
need to
other
have to
choice, but to listen.
You don't have to think about it. That's the beauty of it. So smash that subscribe button and leave a comment below. We read all the comments.
We do.
Read them.
You tape them to
Usually-
your wall and just
Yeah.
seethe every day.
Usually I cry for a little bit
Yeah.
afterward, but most of the time when people are like, Phil, your hair looks really nice, that really does give me a boost of energy. So I do appreciate that. So we'll be back next week with another episode. Hopefully we talk about some hair maybe next week. I don't know. Maybe something more pressing, maybe some actual football we'll get to. I think mandatory minicamp is next week, Eric.
It is.
Then we can actually talk about some football. We
That's
can
right.
talk about what's happening because it's
Absolutely.
mandatory minicamp. Maybe Melvin Gordon will be there.
I think our friend Ben Swanson is taking a vacation, so he won't be around, but everyone else, all the usual cast of characters should be there.
Ben Swanson? I don't know.
He used to try out for the podcast supervisor role, but it's been a long time.
It has been a long time. Yeah.
So
Gosh. And the show really hasn't been
it's
affected.
improved, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So kind of disappointing. Okay, well, we'll be back next week. Until then, for Eric Dalala, I am Phil Milani. You've been listening to
The Neutral Zone.